Thank you. Welcome to our building code tag meeting. John, do you mind going through roll call?
Absolutely. All right, Andrew Klein,
I'm here.
Sue Kaufman,
Here.
Mark Sniffen, Sean Carlstrom. Looks like Mark just joined. Mark, are you here?
Yes, I am. Good morning.
Welcome. All right, Sean did not show up. I don't see him. Corey Thomas.
I'm here.
Corey, welcome. Todd Byruther. Todd logged in. Robert Graper. Let's see, Robert. Chris Seaman.
He'll probably be a little bit late. He drops his kids off at 10 in the morning for school.
That's right. Excuse me. Al Spalding. Is Al here? Welcome. That's 4. Michael Barth. And then looks like Charles Calvano is here. Are you here, Charlie?
Yep.
Welcome.
Thanks.
And that gives us 4 with an ex officio, Stoyan. So how does that work? Well, I guess it's 5 if we count the chair.
3,
Yeah.
1, 2,
8, 9.
3, 4, 5, and then ex officio.
5 plus ex officio?
Yes, sir.
I think we're good.
Yeah, I think that's a quorum. All right.
All right. Well, thanks, John. Terry, it looks like you might be the only guest. If I'm missing anyone, good morning. Thanks for joining us.
You bet.
If I'm missing anyone else in your guest and you'd like to introduce yourself, please speak up. So, all right, let's take a look at the agenda. It's pretty simple and straightforward. I'll take a motion.
I'll move to adopt the agenda.
Thank you, Sue.
It's Al, I'll second.
Thanks, Al. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Anyone opposed? And motion passes. So next up, review and approve last meeting minutes. These are posted and they're up in front of you now, so take a look and let us know if you see any mistakes or revisions that need to be made. If not, then feel free to make a motion.
I'll move to adopt the meeting minutes.
Thank you, Sue.
This is Al, I'll second.
Thank you, Al. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? And motion passes. So next up are reports.
And I'll just give a little bit of a background from the minutes. As you saw, we have sections 18 through 25 in the IBC significant changes that needed to be done, and that it looks like they got tackled. And then on the IEBC side for significant changes, we had chapters 7 through 11 that needed to be done, and I believe those got done as well. So,
And I want to thank you, Sue and Chris doing this great job with short notice. So I really appreciate your help, and I thank you everybody for helping and using your personal time helping in this. I appreciate the help.
and I did highlight the ones that were the new ones, so you can jump in whenever y'all want.
All right, well, thank you. Sue, did you want to jump in? You're on mute, by the way.
Yeah, just a sec. I was just gonna pull it up,
Okay,
pull up the actual code on my end, just in case I needed to look at that. Kind of did these as a sort of a whirlwind. Okay. So, yeah, first, hold on a sec here, that didn't pull up. There we go. First chapter. Chapter 18. Okay. Yeah, so 1807.2.2, this is just about an amendment. We have clarified backfill heights measured from the bottom of the footing, and that one I think was already filled in last time. And next one is 1802.1, and this is just the design basis, and amendment adds the availability of using the load combinations in ASCE 7, section 2.4, along with the other 1603. So next one, 1803.5.7, amendment clarifies support versus specifying underpinning, and adds excavation retaining systems under options to support the excavation. Some of these are, not necessarily really significant changes, but I just covered quite, a lot of the things, unless it was super just just a little word change or something. So excavations near foundations, same section, clarify the intent is to require an assessment in accordance with 1803.5.7. 1806, load combinations, add the, again, these are just adding references to ASCE 7. Same with this next one, 1807.2.4. It's a new section on segmental retaining walls, and again, it's a new section. It needs to comply with ASTM 1372. 1808.3. Again, this is another one referencing ASCE 7. And let's see, 1808.8.1, removed a section specifying requirements when a concrete is placed through a funnel hopper. Yeah, this one was, I wasn't really sure if this was a change in cost. It looks like you can't use a funnel, it doesn't have this ability to use a funnel hopper anymore for concrete or grout. Let's see. I don't know. I'm just not really an expert in this, but I don't think we need an amendment, so probably no. But unless somebody had some knowledge about funnel hoppers and that we need to use them, I would probably say no in this tag group. So next section, so I would just go ahead and you can put no's on those. 1809.5.1, a new section requiring frost protection at required exits, so the door will swing out without an obstruction. So this is an additional cost. I think it's a good change to the code. So, you know, if you had like ice that would build up on an exterior door, you're required to provide frost protection. So your exterior door would be able to open without ice building up. So 1810.3.1.1 amendment this is another one, just adding ASCE 7 load combinations. 1810.3.3.1 adds an exception to the load testing. It's just an exception to for load testing if you have it approved by the building official, that you don't have to do load testing. 1810.3.3.1.9 helical piles. There's just some additional design criteria for helical piles. It's probably not an additional cost, but I'm not necessarily sure. 1810.3.4, a subsection is renamed to add or strata to the title. So it's really not a significant change. 1810.3.5.3.1, structural requirement added for structures assigned to seismic category D, E, or F. That the design of the H piles need to conform with AISC 341, and this is an additional cost. 18, I don't think that we need an amendment though. 1810.3.6 splices added an same kind of thing, added an exception for buildings assigned to, it's not an additional cost, assigned to seismic design category A or B. Splices need not comply with the 50% tension requirement. So 1810.3.8 specified precast concrete piles shall be designed and detailed with ACI. 1810.3.9.2. These next few are just availability that you can use ASCE 7 for load combinations. So 1810.3.11.2, a new item number 3 with requirements for connection of pile caps to H piles. 1810.3.12, again, this is more a design requirement change to just ACI 318 with ASCE 7 is an exemption for the overstrength factor. 1810.3.13, design requirement change to ACI 318. Next one was just renaming a section. 1810.4.1.3 removed a sentence about installing in heavy heaving soils. 1810.4.5 added 2 exceptions for vibratory driving. 1810.4.11 added a requirement for manufacturer rating for torque for helical piles. And that's it for chapter 18.
Can we have this, the question mark, can we change it to, you know, any suggestion, no or yes? Or if the TAC members doesn't have any opinion at this time, we can make a note, a comment that it needs a further research. That's an option too.
I think you could put a yes on there that is an additional criteria they have to meet, so it would be an additional cost. So.
Thank you.
So do we want to just do these chapter by chapter as any other comments, or we can go into chapter 19 next?
Yeah, this is Mark. I was just curious on the frost protection. How is that accomplished? Is that like you would have to put some kind of heat tape or something on that at the exits, the frost protection at the exits?
It doesn't say how you're supposed to do it. It just says you're supposed to do it so that you don't have an exit blocked with, you know, ice or snow, or that, you know, so that the exit could not open.
So would that be like just extra insulation in that area, or it just doesn't say how, it just says that?
Well, like, you know, a lot of, you go to, you know, some of those places, you know, that get a lot of snow and ice, and, you know, if you had you know, a situation, I mean, a lot of those places just have heated walks. So, you know, they may have to heat the exterior exits, you know, landings, so that it doesn't, you know, you don't have a problem with ice or snow blocking the exit.
So yeah, so I guess my question is that when you say, yes, there is a cost, did they, if we don't know the method, how do we know what the cost is going to be? I mean, I agree there's an additional cost, but did whoever wrote this amendment, did they have a justification in their costs, a method or something?
I did not go back through and look at the you know, the hearings and to see if there was specifically for this. I mean, that's something that, you know, could be done. I mean, yeah, I mean, if you think that we don't need to have an amendment to this, if we want to change this, I you know, personally, I think it's a good idea, because you don't want to have a situation where an exit gets blocked because of snow or ice buildup. So, you know, it's, you know, it's dangerous. You need to have your exits be able to open.
Oh yeah, I agree. I just
And obviously there is an additional cost. I don't know what it is. I mean, you know, it doesn't say the method that you have to use to provide. It says it's a requirement that you provide it. So, you know, it's up to the, you know, designer to figure out, you know, how to provide that frost protection to prevent the door from being blocked.
Maybe a higher U factor door would do it, huh? I'm kidding.
Well, it's at the landing. I mean, so, you know, it's the landing of the door. It's not the door itself. It's the landing. You know,
Could alcove it too, or I mean, you just do all the smart things that people do when they live in those places.
yeah. But, you know, again, you know, you go to some of those colder climates that have, you know, half the year is, you know, snowpack, and they have to figure out a lot of things. I mean, you know, some of those places may just have, you know, permanently installed heated walks, and which would be a heated pad just outside the building. You know, it's a additional cost. You got to provide, you know, not just the installation of it, you got to maintain heat and something to, you know, year round, or you know, like, so.
Yeah. Thank you, Sue. Any other questions? Mark, did you want to suggest, you know, that we look into that further, or are you okay
well,
with the recommendation? Yes.
I can see where since I didn't read the code, I can't really comment too much. I was just you know, I was based out of Colorado for many years, and we did have problems with exits and frost. And but I don't know if it just, I guess my question is, does it say exposed exit doors versus covered exit doors versus, you know?
No, let me look. 1809, see, 1809.5.1. Let me look at it real quick.
Mark, or maybe does it reference any kind of climate zone, like so that we don't get AHJs, like, you know, us in Tacoma trying to, like, we obviously shouldn't need to look at this section in Tacoma, but the folks in Leavenworth probably would.
It's a brand new section, and it just says frost protection shall be provided at exterior landings for all required exits with outward swinging doors. Frost protection shall only be required to the extent necessary to ensure the unobstructed opening of the required exit doors. So this is, you know,
I would say a covered landing if, you know,
oh, yeah,
If-
you know, there
if
you
you don't
go.
think you'd have wind, you know, covering stuff, I would say that meets that
And
requirement.
it's under section 1809, which is shallow foundations. So, you know, it's about frost protection, under the category of shallow foundations and under frost protection.
Okay,
So
that
it
makes
doesn't-
more sense. Thank you. I didn't realize it was under shallow foundations.
Yeah. Okay, all right. All right, so do we need to go through any approval process? With
Yeah, I think,
this?
Stoyan, I assume you prefer we do it, chapter by chapter, correct?
Chapter by chapter, yes.
Okay. Any other comments on chapter 18? Sue, you want to do the honors then and recommend this to move forward?
All right, I would like to recommend, make a motion to move chapter 18, significant changes report forward for, I guess, full council.
Yeah, well, we go to.
BFP,
Yeah,
move it forward to BFP.
okay.
Yes, Al, I second that.
Thank you, Al. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I,
Aye. Anyone opposed? And motion passes. So chapter 19 is yours.
Okay. All right, 1901. There was a amendment removing requirements for precast concrete diaphragms for seismic design categories C through F. 1901.3, anchoring to concrete, removed screw anchors as part of the anchor options. 1901.7 is a new section with just tolerances added for, I didn't really have many comments about this, tolerances for that were added for structural concrete. 1902, just the section was renamed, and they added new subsections on design displacement and special structural wall. 1903.1 removed an exception for use of the ASTM standards. And 1906, it's a new section that replaces the 2018 section titled structural plain concrete. And it's comprised of an exception for plain concrete in the 2018 code. 1908, many subsections were removed, and then it just referred to complying with ACI 318. And that was it.
All right, beautiful. Any questions? Comments? So you want to do the honors again?
Okay, I'll make a motion to forward the significant changes report for IBC chapter 19 to BFP.
Thank you. I will second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Is anyone opposed? And motion passes. So it looks like chapters 20 and 21, there were no changes, correct?
20,
Yeah,
there
oh,
was just
20.
one on, yeah, nothing for chapter 20.
Okay, yeah. Did you want to go over 21s?
Yeah, there's only one on chapter 21, chapter 21, section 2109.2.4.8 on exterior finish. They added several new subsections with requirements for plaster. And that was it. do you want to go ahead and approve or that one, make a motion to
Yeah,
approve?
let's do that. Let me see if there are any questions or comments. And it doesn't look like it, so yeah, go ahead.
Okay, make a motion to forward significant changes report for chapter 21 to BFP.
Thank you.
This is Al, I'll second.
Thank you, Al. Any further discussion? And everyone in favor, please say aye.
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 Is anyone opposed? And motion passes. Back to you, Sue.
Okay, chapter 22 is steel. There were just a few in this one. 2205.2.1.1. An amendment was added for beam to column moment connections in special and intermediate moment frames. This is specific to the seismic design categories B or C. And similarly, another similar amendment was added in 2205.2.1.5 for seismic design categories D, E, or F. Amendment was added for beam to column moment connections for special and intermediate moment frames. And then the third one is 2209 for steel storage racks. There's a new section, certification is requiring, it requires a certificate of compliance for certain storage racks, and ones that are above a certain height and that sort of thing. And this is just one that I did say that it is an additional cost because you've got to have a certificate of compliance that you didn't have to have before. That's it.
All right. Any questions or comments? All right.
Okay.
Sue, did you want to make
I'll
motion?
make a motion to forward the significant, significant changes report for chapter 22 to BFP.
Thank you. And I'll second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Is anyone opposed? And the motion passes. 23.
Okay, chapter 23 is wood. It's 2303.2. There were minor under fire retardant treated wood. There were minor amendments related to fire testing requirement that were added. 2303.4 under trusses. There was an amendments added for permanent and individual truss member restraint and diagonal bracing section, including 5 new figures that show installation diagrams and alternatives. 2303.7 on shrinkage, clarification of shrinkage as a result of changes in the wood after installation. 2304.9 under lumber decking, an amendment to allow other lumber decking patterns and connections with engineering substantiations. 2304.10.1, new section with requirements for fire resistance ratings for connections in type 3 or 3A. This is the new type of construction under type 3A, or excuse me, 4A, 4B, and 4C construction. Table 2304.10.2 under fastening schedule, minor additions and changes to some fastener types for various building elements in this table. 2304.11.4 under roof decks, an amendment to allow concealed spaces as long as they comply with section 602. There was a section that was removed from the 2021 code, laminated timbers were removed from the 2021 code. I don't think there's a cost. I don't know. I think you could probably put no, but I don't know. It's just not an option that's in the code anymore. So, so you could probably just put no under there. Yeah. 2304.12.2.6 changed. This has to do with ventilation between balcony or elevated walking surfaces. They basically redefined it as weather exposed surfaces. They, instead of just, areas that are exposed to rain, snow, they didn't clarify what type of weather. They just say weather exposed surfaces versus rain or snow or whatever. So 2306.1, new table identifying all the standards. This is again for design and construction of wood elements. 2306.1.4, allowable loads for lumber decking, revised load calculation for 3 and 4 inch decking. 2308.5.9, undercutting and notching. Just a terminology, these are two section 2308.5.10 as well, just a terminology change. It's not really a significant change. So 2308.6.6.2, solid blocking for purple walls for full perimeter of the is required for the full perimeter of the dwelling and the interior walls on the foundation. There was an exception if you designed according to the word WSP or DWD method, you could have that bracing removed, but they removed that exception in the 2021 code. So I would say, yeah, it is an increased cost because you do have to provide that solid blocking. Table 2308.7.3.1, the table was reconfigured with minor changes to this number of nails in some categories. And then table 2308.7.3.1, heel type connection adjustment factors are, just new table in the 2020 code. I don't know whether there's really any, I don't think there's any major costs or anything like that. They're just minor changes. So yeah, so in some cases there's more nails required. So you could say it's a slightly increased cost. So you could say yes.
Yeah, what do folks think? A little extra time and nails, I think.
Yeah, there were more minor changes, but increased the number of nails in most cases. So that's it.
Any questions or comments? All right, Sue, you want to do the honors on that one too?
I'd like to forward the significant changes report for chapter 23 to BFP.
Thank you.
This Al, I'll second.
Thank you, Al. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 And is there anyone opposed? Motion passes. Chris, are you ready to go over glazing?
Yeah, we already did these, I thought. But I can do them again.
No, I think you're right. I think we did. Let me make sure.
I remember because I understand exactly zero of the glazing stuff.
I had them, they were white, so I think we had gone through them.
Yeah.
Earlier.
Yeah.
Okay.
Turn white.
let me
We can-
refamiliarize
We can
myself with them.
formally do it again if that helps, but it was just the way you calculate whether or not the glass is securely supported. The deflection is more of a range type calculation instead of there used to be like a hard stop at a certain value. So it's just changed the way the calc work, but not materially different.
Yeah, this is Al. Chris, you went through this last
Yeah.
meeting.
Okay, cool.
Yes, yeah, actually, I'm looking at it right now. I had them on a separate line, so they were completed.
Okay. We did not make a motion though, correct?
Well,
To
maybe.
move them forward? Last
No, they
meeting?
were, I've got it where it says chapter 24 in my notes was approved as shown, chapter 25 was
Oh.
approved as shown.
Oh, wonderful. Okay.
I mistyped it. They weren't completed. I missed that. So that's my fault.
Excellent. No worries.
All right. So I think that's it for the IBC.
Yeah. So IEBC now.
Okay, want me to go ahead?
Yes, please.
Right, chapter 7. Sorry, it looks like I missed getting some of those lines in between those sections on the table.
No worries. I'll go back and reformat all that.
Yeah, they kind of blending together on the screen there. So 702.4, window opening control devices on replacement windows. The threshold was changed to the bottom of the clear opening versus bottom of the window seal. I mean, I don't know, you could argue, is this an additional cost? But, you know, so basically the threshold is basically going to be a little bit higher because instead of the bottom of the window sill, it's going to be up to where the clear opening is as to where that threshold is. So maybe it's slightly increased cost. 702.5.1, a new section with criteria for control devices on emergency escape and rescue openings. 702.6, new section with criteria for bars, grills, covers, or screens on emergency escape and rescue openings. 704.1.1 is a new section with allowances for projections in corridors in group I2 condition 1. 704.2 is an egress requirements for movable casework. 704.3 locking arrangements in for group E, group B, educational, and group I4. Let's see, I can take a look at that. I said question mark as far as cost, so let me take a look at where that one is. 704.3.
That probably corresponds to changes in the fire code and building code that allow for special locking arrangements. It's more of an option than it is a cost, is what I recall.
Oh, okay, hold on. Yeah, let me see if I can find that section real quick. For some reason I put a question mark on here for cost, but you could be right, Chris, that the computer's running slow here.
It doesn't require the locking. It just refers to chapter 10, 10.2.8 of the building code. That's the text.
Oh, okay, 704, yeah. Okay, then you could just change that to no then. Okay. All right. This is a 705.2 in the 2018 code. Is a section that was removed from the 21 code on structural and construction loads. Probably because it's covered elsewhere in the code. 705.4. It's an amendment to not allow the reuse of damaged ballast or existing aggregate surfacing from built-up roofs. 706.3.2, it's the threshold for wind speed increased from 115 to 130 for evaluation of whether greater than 50% of the roof replacement for wind speed. And added an exception for buildings compliant with ASCE 788. 707, a new section under Group I2 facilities, ambulatory care facilities, and outpatient clinics. Any altered portion of an existing electrical system shall be required to meet installation requirements and NFPA 99. This is one I did say would be an additional, probably an additional cost.
Maybe Al, would you make them do that anyway?
Maybe so.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is an interesting, I was actually trying to find my, before he got there, this definitely popped out at me. So I'm like, this is interesting.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting for Group I2 facilities for sure. Ambulatory care facilities and outpatient clinics, I'd have to research. Any altered portion of an existing electrical system or systems shall be required to meet installation and equipment requirements in NFPA 99. What's 707 again, Sue?
Electrical. It's a new section. It wasn't in the 18 code.
Oh, yeah, this is kind of a weird, I'm going to have to do some research on this. We would require this regardless because all I2 facilities that we work with are CMS certified. And as such, Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services adopts the, through their own codified federal regulations, they adopt NFPA 101 and 99 in particular. And so we would be looking at this, but they've also lumped in ambulatory care facilities, which we do regulate ambulatory surgical centers, but and some outpatient clinics that are underneath the license, the umbrella license of a hospital, if that makes sense. I don't think I said that right. Under the license of the hospitals anyway. So I don't think this is a big change for us, but so this is,
you would say it's more cost in comparison to the 2018 code requirement because it's a new, it is requiring compliance with NFPA.
so what's the title of 707, section 707?
Electrical.
Oh, really?
It's altered equipment. I think maybe the challenge is, Al, if some of these things are not things that you guys normally review because they're below the permit threshold for you guys or where you don't regulate them, the building official is going to be the one looking at it, but then it's electrical stuff, which makes it weird because most building officials don't do electrical. So
yeah, predominantly this would go to L&I, right, for review, other than the list of like, I don't know, maybe a dozen or so AHJs that have their own electrical inspector program.
But this is the code. I mean, this is, of course, the national code, the model code where across the country, it could be, so building departments may, be all encompassing and all covering electrical. So
I actually think that this is actually already a part of the code, how we're applying it now. I don't have any issue with this. So let me give you an example of how we do this in practice. How we do this with coordinating with L&I today. Let's say you went into a nursing home and you decided that, oh, we're going to have to install some new outlets for whatever reason, they would have to meet current requirements to do that. I don't care how it was wired previously. So you're still going to have to meet current requirements in electrical code. And frankly, any piece of that circuit that you're altering has to meet current requirements as well. So we're kind of doing that already. And this is weird because it's talking about any altered portion of an existing electrical system shall be required to, this is a weird circular thing because it's going to take me back to NFPA 70 anyways. I don't have an issue with it. I don't think it's super valuable though. Super valuable. I don't think it's really helpful, but.
So maybe it's not really an additional cost, at least in terms in the state of Washington.
No, I think in practice, we're already doing this. I'd say no. So
Okay.
Say no
Okay.
additional cost.
Okay.
Thanks for letting me think through that.
This is Mark. I just had a question. Does the state LNI, I know they adopt NFPA 70, but do they automatically adopt NFPA 99?
Through reference, Mark.
Okay.
99 is absolutely going to reference 70.
Okay, if there's no other questions, then,
No, I think you're good.
okay, I'll make a motion to forward the IEB significant changes for chapter 7 to BFP.
I would second that. This is Al.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you, Al. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
And anyone opposed? Motion passes. So on to level 2 alterations.
Okay, chapter 8, 801.3 is a new section specifying things that are exempted from the work area requirements. This is like mechanical, electrical, fire protection systems, abatement of hazardous materials, windows, hardware, operating controls, electrical outlets and signs, and alterations undertaken for the primary purpose of increasing accessibility. So those do not have to follow the additional requirements for work area if it's specifically an alteration for one of those 3 categories. 802.3 under smoke compartments, they changed the terminology from patient to care recipient. I don't know how that impacts the code that much, but they're just calling them care recipient versus patient.
It does have some impact actually, Sue, for all you AHJs that have assisted living facilities in your areas. These are licensed healthcare facilities, but they can also have what are called independent residents that are not receiving services. So that messes with my head a little bit when I'm doing plan review. And they go, yeah, we've got 1 floor that's independent living, not licensed, 2 floors that are 1 floor that's fully licensed. So I can definitely count the care recipients on that floor. And then 1 floor that half of the floor is independent, half the floor is licensed. Now that makes my head spin because I've got to figure out, okay, and so it makes it really hard. And practically, I'm going to take a very conservative approach to that. And I'm going to count every head in there when it comes to smoke compartments, even though this says care recipients. I don't know what I was in the same issue when it said patient than from care recipient. So it's not that big of a change, but I don't think the change helps me out much. I just want to make you all aware of that because I know most of you have assisted living facilities in your communities.
Is that a defined term?
I don't know.
I don't believe it is in the code.
Care recipient, you mean? Am I still on?
Yeah, we can
Still
hear
here?
you.
Oh, okay, all right. Um, any other comments on that section? Okay, we can move on. 802.4 is they included the trim of the walls, you know, part of the requirements for compliance, you know, for and added testing requirements that are required to show compliance. 802.4.1 supplemental interior finish requirements included a trim of the walls again in this section as part of something that has to comply. 803.2.2 just changed from all I occupancies that used to, the section used to just in general say I occupancies, and they changed it to just I1, I3, and I4. Section requires sprinklers where the exits and corridors are shared by more than one tenant, or where serving an occupant load of greater than 30. My comment was just that making whatever adjustment for not having an R, we don't have R4 occupancies in state of Washington. 808.2.3, it's a new section in the 21 code requiring sprinklers in group I2, depending on the size of the work area. The 803.2.5, new section in the 21 code requiring sprinklers where the occupant load is greater than 30, and the exits and corridors are shared by more than one tenant. 803.2.6, added underground key as a part of the exceptions for supervision in roadway boxes, and these have to do with like fire alarm stuff. 803.4.1.2 added automatic to fire alarm requirement for sprinklers generalized to include all facilities versus residential care and assisted living facilities under group I1 occupancies. Al, I don't know if that has anything to do, you know, if that matters at all. I don't know if it's necessarily a change.
It doesn't feel like it's a big change to me.
Okay, yeah. 803.4.1.3 under group I2 added automatic to fire alarm. So they're just sort of, you know, adding that it's not just a fire alarm, they're specifying automatic. 804.3, it's a section, looks like, oh yeah, new section for the minimum clear width of ramps and corridors where corridors are used for, I think that I'm missing some, it can, yeah, all right. A new section in the 21 code adding a requirement for minimum clear width of ramps and corridors where the corridors are used for movement of care recipients in beds. And this one again may be that it technically it's an added cost, but maybe it's not. You know, maybe Al, you can add a comment about that.
Well, I'm just curious because I don't have the 2021 IEBC, so I'm limping along a little bit here. But what is the minimum width in the that would be
so
applicable?
80. Let me go to the 804 point.
If it's 96 inches or 8 feet, whatever, however you want to say it, that I'm good with that.
Okay, hold on just a sec. 804.3. Okay, it says in group I2 occupancies in areas where corridors are used for movement of care recipients in beds, the clear width of ramps and corridors shall not be less than 48 inches.
Oh, whoa.
It's a new
That's-
section.
And this is in the IEBC?
Yes,
Because in the IBC, it's,
it's a brand new section in the IEBC in level 2 alterations. So maybe this is a yes in terms of cost.
well, I'm just a little confused because if I go to section, if I go to 2021 in, I'll just go there now, chapter 10, it's 1020. Of course, this is new construction, not alterations. You know, the group I2 in areas where required for bed movement, the minimum corridor width is 96 inches. So they're
So this
saying,
is much less than.
yeah, that's
This is the
half.
section under means of egress, so it would be for an alteration. Under, yeah, just it's a brand new section under group I2 is the title. And it says in group I2 occupancies in areas where corridors are used for movement and care recipients. So they're just saying it's showing not less than 48 inches. So
All right, so we do have corridors in nursing homes and hospitals, really, and psych hospitals we're talking about here that are potentially less than 96 inches, but it's when they are being used for bed movement that they're required to be the 96 inch.
well, this is only 48 inches, so it's definitely, you know, below our existing standards. So the question, it would not be an additional cost.
Not only that, well, yeah,
But
you're
the
right.
question is do we need, as the state, do we need to amend this section further? That, I mean, because it's putting a much lower standard than we're currently requiring.
Well, that's a good
40
question.
inches.
804.3 IEBC. Okay, I've taken a note here. So I'll tell you what I'm going to do in practice, and I would encourage anyone else to do this as well. Because it's an I2, and I know that as an I2, you're likely going to be participating in federal reimbursement programs. I'm going to apply NFPA 101, which is harder for the HJs to do. It's harder for you to get a code path to 101, but I definitely have explicit permission to do that. So I'm going to use NFPA 101, and there isn't going to be in a level 2 renovation anything less than a 96 inch corridor. If it's used, and again, it's where required for bed movement or stretcher movement. So I'm going to go around that is what I'm telling you. Which is the best practice. I'd have to look into this before I'd say we really need a code amendment.
Well, I guess the question is sometimes, you know, the designer starts out with the building code, and if they're like, hey, you know, score, I only have to make it 40 inches wide, and then they, you know, get a little farther down the road, and then they end up having to, you know, it's never allowed. Then why, you know, maybe we should just make sure that we fix it in the state version of the code. So
yeah, this seems like this would create some confusion and probably some consternation on a number of people's. I mean, in the building code, there's already an exception for I2s for new construction for corridors to not have a clear width of 96 inches in areas where there will not be stretcher bed movement for access to care as part of the defend in place strategy. And I am seeing that. I'm having providers submitting new drawings these days that say we're going to provide memory care in our licensed assisted living facility, and we want to build that portion of the assisted living facility as an I2. I make them go through by state amendment, we have that identified as an I1 condition 2 occupancy. So if they want to build it as a memory care, I'm making them go through the alternate means and method process in chapter 1 to show me how it's as safe, an I2 is as safe as an I1C2. And that's a stretch, but I'm gonna have to do
Al,
yeah.
I think the context around this section helps when we're looking at the scope of 804.1. What this section is saying, 804.3, the way I read it is saying, so normally in a level 2 alteration, the scope of the IEBC only applies to the work area. What I think this section is saying is even outside of the work area, all these corridors need to meet this minimum requirement. So it's not saying you can build a 48-inch wide corridor. It's saying if you have any corridors in the occupancy that are going to be used for patient movement in beds, you're going to need to increase them to at least 48 inches, if that makes sense. I don't think that this section says you can build a new corridor that skinny.
What if you're altering, you're altering that area? I mean, I don't know. Again, I think there might be some, it's just a question. Do we need to clarify that in our state code just so there's not confusion about that? Because it says, it doesn't say corridors or ramps outside the area where they're moving. It just says in areas where corridors are used for movement of care recipients in beds. So it is pretty much specifying those are the corridors they're talking about.
Okay, so I'm still unsure about this. What's the process if I need a little bit more time to do some research? I mean, I'll try and do it right now, but I'm struggling with, for whatever reason, I don't think I have the IEBC.
Well, what if, would the tag comment be that we may need, it may be that there's a state amendment may be needed, and maybe that gets clarified at BFP. Is that?
I think that's
I like it.
the most reasonable path forward.
Yeah, just evaluate, whether an amendment is needed regarding corridor width.
We can add a recommendation for further research and
Research whether,
yes, so the report could be approved by the council, but we can get back to it later and modify it.
Yeah, and maybe you don't need to, maybe it's not that big of a deal. I mean, it just says it's a minimum width, so obviously.
Is the significant changes book available and handy? Like, could John pull it up?
Available yet?
Oh,
and this is a brand new section in the coding, so it is. I mean, it's brand new.
Yeah, exactly.
So it might be worthwhile going back and listening to the committee hearings or looking through those, the reason why this section is added to the 21 codes. But anyway, all right, moving on. 804.4.1.1, the changed. This is kind of terminology change. They changed terminology instead of unsprinkler building to a building without an approved automatic sprinkler system. Table 804.1.1 stories, and the same thing. They're just changing some terminology from unsprinklered to a building without an approved automatic sprinkler system. 804.5.1.2, requirement for 2 exit changes from any group I2 patient or sleeping rooms over 1,000 square feet within a work area, 2 group I2 condition 2 work areas that include altered care suites. So it's kind of changing, maybe Al, that I don't know if you have any comments on that.
I don't
So
at
they-
the moment, but I'm definitely taking notes.
Yeah. It's a threshold change. So, you know, it's a requirement that they have 2 exits. You know, it's for group I2. You know, it used to be the criteria in the 18 code is for any group I2 patient or sleeping rooms over 1,000 square feet in the work area. And the new criteria is group I2 condition 2 work areas that include altered care suites. Doesn't specify any square footage anymore.
I don't think this creates a problem for us.
Okay. Okay, 804.5.4. Panic and fire exit hardware. The section title is revised to include and fire. So it used to just say panic hardware. And now they're calling it panic and fire exit hardware. 804.6.3. Corridors need to be that are protected in accordance with IBC section 716 do not have to be sealed. 804.7, an amendment adding a limitation of 30 feet for dead end corridors and I2 occupancies. Group I2 was also there was some exceptions added 2, 3, and 4 to this dead end corridor requirement. 804.11, refuge areas, an amendment requiring alterations does not reduce the refuge area capacity below that required for horizontal exits. And for horizontal exits, forming smoke compartments, the capacity of the refuge areas for I2, I1, I2, I3, and Group B ambulatory care facilities shall not be reduced as required in the IBC under those sections. So this is just some criteria about not reducing the refuge area size. 806.3, healthcare facilities, new section in the 21 code for group I2 facilities, ambulatory care and outpatient clinics requiring any added portion of an existing electrical system be required to meet installation and equipment requirements in NFPA 99. And again, this is a new section in the 21 code under, you know, electrical requirements again. And 808.1, the section was revised significantly. Previously, if the occupant load increased by over 20%, plumbing fixtures in the story were required to be provided in the quantities specified in the IPC based on the increased occupant load. The 2021 code requires only group I2 facilities, ambulatory care facilities, and outpatient clinics meet the installation requirements of NFPA 99 for any added portion of an existing medical gas system.
Well, we don't adopt the IPC, do we?
No,
No.
no, but so previously, yeah, the amendment would, you know, referred to the IPC, and the 21 code just says that under this section, you know, it's basically a new requirement that 21 code requires group IT facilities, ambulatory care facilities, and outpatient clinics to meet installation and equipment requirements in NFPA 99. So maybe it's not because for any added portion of an existing medical gas system, but maybe it's not an increased cost because it's already probably being required already.
Correct. I would agree.
I guess the question is were we even enforcing any, you know, something that if plumbing, if previously there was this in the 2018 codes, it was based on, you know, an increase in more than 20% of the plumbing fixtures. And there probably should have been a state amendment that referred to the UPC. But now the requirement, so was anybody really concerned about the increase in plumbing fixtures? Were we in the state kind of enforcing this? Maybe not, but previously, so that's why I asked the question is, do we want an amendment based on an increase in occupant load for everything else besides group I2? I guess it's healthcare facilities is the section. But under the 2018 code, I think it was just under 809.1. Does anybody have the 2018 code up for?
I have it open. We have a local amendment there, and we are not referring to Uniform Plumbing Code or International Plumbing Code. We are referring to International Building Code. So
For the occupant load.
Yes, where the occupant load of the story is increased by more than 20%, plumbing fixtures for the story shall be provided in quantities specified in the International Building Code based on the increased occupant load. This is the text that.
And that's for any occupancy, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that's why I might have looked that up. That's why I made that comment that we may need to continue our, so we do need to have this amendment to that section. And so that's, I guess, so there's a new criteria for group I2 facilities. And I don't know if you just, the new amendment took away the requirement for that 20%. That was the previous requirement. And then it sounds like we had amended that in the state, but the new requirement only talks about group I2 facilities, ambulatory care, and outpatient clinics. And it said for any portions that are remodeled, they have to, of an existing medical gas system, they have to meet these requirements. So they took away all the other requirements. So I guess, yeah, we do need to still have a state amendment for that increase in plumbing fixtures, although it was taken out of the model code. So that is a question, I guess, for the rest of the tag. Do we want to retain our state amendment?
And also, so does that increase the cost then? Should I change that to yes?
No, the model code is kind of a no, because unless you're it's a decrease for everything else except, I guess, group I2 ambulatory care and outpatient clinics. But I think those were already, any added portion of to a medical gas system would have already been having to comply, correct, Al, with NFPA 99?
Correct. Sorry.
All right, so that's not a change in our state. They already had to comply with that new section, how this was revised, but this requirement related to occupant load has been removed from the model code. So it sounds like we do need an amendment to retain our state requirement.
So you're suggesting we can add so in this case, we'll have the existing state amendment plus, what is shown for healthcare facilities, is it?
Yeah, we would retain that state amendment.
Okay. So, John, can you change the recommendation there or retain the existing state amendment? And somehow we need to clarify that this is in addition to the new model code.
Yeah, you probably have to add it as a new section or something like that.
Yeah.
Were there any other questions? Otherwise, I can make a motion.
Sue, I was able to find the code proposal on that corridors one.
Oh, yeah.
It is EB 74-19 from John Williams from the Healthcare Committee.
Oh.
It says that the intent of the proposal is to address require corridor width in group I2. The change to level 2 alterations is to allow for existing corridors to remain at the 48-inch width as permitted. It does not make sense to make the portion of a corridor wider than the routes leading to and from that portion. So it seems came from a committee, ICC committee. They said that there was not a cost increase or decrease on that.
Okay.
So let me clarify. I now have no issues with what my boss proposed.
Okay. Well, then maybe going back to go up there on that, that research, so that, maybe need to do any more research then on that.
We could put a note in there maybe that it says where it came from. Then we remember.
Perfect.
It was, dang it, I had it.
EB something.
Yep. 74-19. And it was from John Williams. He had a few that he lumped in with it. There's one also about in level 1 alterations. Maybe it didn't make it all the way, but it was about furniture in nursing home corridors. That's how it started. So.
Okay. So without any other questions, I'll make a motion that we forward the IEBC Chapter 8 significant changes to BFP.
This
Thank
is
you,
Al.
Sue.
I'd second that.
Thank you, Al. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I
Is anyone opposed? And motion passes. So,
Okay. Okay, so Chapter 9. All right, 903.4. So this is a new section in the IEB, in this IEBC. In the code requires enhanced classroom acoustics for all Group E classrooms with a volume of 20,000 cubic feet or less. So to me, it seemed like was this an error with code writing?
no,
It seems
it's
like
not.
Oh, it's not. Okay.
Yeah, so it comes from the ANSI accessibility standard. And the idea is that it's hard for some folks to be able to hear or pick out or just learn in a classroom that's noisy. So the size matters because like they're not applying it to like gymnasiums and things. They want it to apply to classrooms where you'd have a single teacher talking at you. So there's all this sound stuff that I don't totally get because I'm not that kind of engineer, but the idea being that
Okay,
stuff is on the walls and ceilings to absorb the sound and not make it bounce around.
right.
Um,
Okay. I get it now. Okay.
okay,
I'm
yeah.
like, well, it seems like, you'd have acoustics, depending on it's too big, but, okay.
Yeah. Like the
So
auditorium is going to get nice because that's how you design an auditorium, but a classroom that's a box with all these bouncy walls.
Right. Okay. I get it. Okay. Thank you for explaining that. So
I had
no
to look it up.
amendment is not needed, but there is an additional cost because they do have to put in enhanced acoustics for classrooms now. Next section, 904.1.4. This is a new section requiring sprinklers for level 3 work areas for all these groups. And so I said there is additional cost. And then amendment, just removing R4 from our, because of our state, we don't have R4 occupancy. 904.1.5 under group I2, it's a new section requiring sprinklers for I2 occupancies for 3 conditions for work areas, kind of specific conditions. So additional costs, I just said yes. So it's new requirements that are triggering sprinklers, and I said no for amendment. 904.1.6, it's a new section in the 21 code requiring sprinklers for windowless stories where new construction would require that story to be sprinklered. So additional cost because previously you could not sprinkler it. So 904.1.7, an amendment requiring sprinklers for all work areas listed in this table versus only work areas that have exits or common or corridors shared by more than one tenant. So it used to be that the requirement was you would have to sprinkler if it was if for work areas that have exits or corridors shared by more than one tenant, or exits or corridors serving an occupant load greater than 30. And now it's just says all conditions require sprinklers. If for those situations in table 903.2.11.6. So next is 905.4, new code section in the 21 code requiring two-way communication systems in buildings with an elevator service when required by the IBC chapter 10. So additional cost related to that. You want to scooch? Yeah, there we go. And that was it.
All right, beautiful. Any questions?
Yeah, a couple clarifying things on the first few of the sprinkler ones. They're not totally new requirements. What it used to say was go see the building code and fire code. If it required sprinklers, put them in. So now you'll see on that list, there's some stuff not there. You'll see that R3 is not there.
Right.
And U is not there. So it's actually a decrease in the requirement.
Okay. So we could put no on, and
yeah,
it's not, yeah. So no.
We
on
still
there.
need to pull R4 out of there, but it's actually a decreased threshold.
Okay.
It looks like a lot more, but it's a decreased threshold. And then
what about I2?
I2, I think that also could be considered a decrease because it's more specific requirements than it is a new requirement. It's just here's how to deal with I2. And it says under what circumstances you don't have to sprinkler the whole floor.
Okay.
If you just have smoke compartments, you can kind of stick to your smoke compartment. And then the windowless stories one, I probably could have got there anyway with some IFC chapter 11 existing building stuff. it's one of those special things that requires retrofit if you look at it funny. So I don't know that that's truly a new cost. We could look at it a little closer, but yeah.
Okay. And then what about the next one, sprinklers for the,
So
there.
yeah, that table is all the weird stuff that requires sprinklers, like your atriums, your
Oh, okay.
aircraft control towers, all your weird things that specifically get called out as needing sprinklers.
Mhm.
I would have probably, we're going to capture that already in the way it was worded before, which was go to the building code. If it required sprinklers, make them do it. But now they're specifically referencing the table so you don't miss it. So I don't see that either as an increased cost.
Oh, no, good. I appreciate those comments.
Yeah, I know all roads that lead to sprinklers, so I'm pretty.
There's no way out. All right. There's no other comments. I'll make a motion to forward the chapter 9 of the IEBC significant changes report to BFP.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you, Chris. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And motion passes. So Chris, you ready to go over chapter 10?
Yep. Let's see. They relocated some requirements back to chapter 4. It looks like they disappeared, but they didn't disappear. They just moved. It talks about incidental use, a new section, and separation requirements for how you construct it. I see it as more of a clarification because if somebody introduced a new incidental use, I would have made them deal with it anyways. This just alerts it to people's attention. This is similar to what Sue was, the couple of sections Sue had about I2 and I1 and changes. I would change my question mark to a no because DOH is going to make you deal with it anyways. There's a new section that says if you take an existing room in an I2 and make it a storage room, you have to make it a smoke partition. That seems more of a clarification to me. You should be telling somebody to do that anyways. Okay, this next one.
Actually,
Yeah.
on
yeah,
on
go
that,
ahead.
on 10, 10 or 1002.4. So if you changed any room in an I2 to storage, and it was beyond 100 square feet, we'd make that be more than the smoke partition, just to let you know.
Okay, it'd have to be a
rated
incidental use rated thing, right? Yeah. So
I'll get that right out of 101, NFPA 101.
okay. And then 10.06.3, that's where the section is talking about when you have to comply with current seismic forces. When they're changing from group S or group U to any other occupancy, you're going to get a seismic upgrade, but you will get it at a reduced force. So it'll be the 75% design forces. So there is a bit of a cost, but it's not as hard hitting as it first appears to be. But I think it makes a lot of sense if you're changing from a storage building or a U to anything else. I mean, that thing wasn't made to stand up anyways. 1009.1, there's a new exception that doesn't make you go check for whether or not you have enough plumbing fixtures until you have more than a 20% increase in occupants. I thought I wrote it down, but I must not have because it's not there. Do we need to wholesale change references to the UPC? I believe there's a reference to the IPC in that section that we, or do we have the catch-all at the beginning of the book that says anytime you see IPC, think UPC.
That must be the matching one that we just discussed that was in the
Yeah,
level.
It
2
is. Yep. Mhm,
Or-
mhm.
Or level 3 or 2 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
So there must be a state amendment. Doyen, is that correct?
I'm looking for it, but I didn't have it open, so I.
Okay.
Okay, let's see.
Believe there are references to IPC in that one. Let me double check. I thought I wrote it down, but I didn't. Yes, it does reference the IPC. So I think what we need to do is actually reference the building code chapter, what is it, 29? Is that where it's talking about the number of fixtures per, how you calculate the number of fixtures you need, which I think we make live in chapter 29 of the building code.
Yes, it is in 29.
Okay, so yeah, I think we need to substitute IPC with wherever we need to send them in the building code. So that would be a yes for we need an amendment. This section is largely reorganized, but the big change is IRC structures are not impacted by the change. So if you change any building, I guess, into an IRC structure, it, yes, there you go. Make it real clear. So it's not a, it's a lessening. This is a companion thing to the classroom acoustics. It only kicks in at change in occupancy and level 3, so it kind of makes a lot of sense. And then there is a new section that has allowances for existing openings that are going to be used as emergency escape and rescue openings. So it's letting you use some existing openings that maybe don't comply with if it were new. And that's it.
Beautiful. Thank you, Chris. Any further discussion or questions? All right. Would you like to do the honors?
Sure. I move to send the chapter 10 recommendations to the BFP.
This is Sue, I'll second.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Sue. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And is anyone opposed? Motion passes. So next up, Chris, back to you for additions.
Okay, this one's easy. More classroom acoustics. Additions have to comply. Duh. It just seems like since it's a new thing, they threw it in there to make sure we don't forget. And then smoke alarms and carbon monoxide alarms and some storm shelter stuff, they were all moved back to chapter 3.
All right, nice and simple. Any questions? All right, Chris.
I'll move to send the chapter 11 recommendations to the BFP.
Thank you.
This is Sue, I'll second.
Thank you, Sue. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And motion passes. So let's see, what have we got next? Dorian, any other business? John?
I think this is all we needed. And then the process is it goes to the standing committee and then it goes to the council. Most likely we will have the submission period between February I think it's February 19th. 60 days, I can't remember the closing date. It was April 8th, I think, but we will be receiving proposals. At the same time, staff will have more time to evaluate the reports, because we will start incorporating the recommendations into the complete, we call it the OTS document. So if we find something that doesn't make sense or any errors, we will correct that and we'll have it for the technical advisory group again to vote on it. And during the same time, if you folks find something that doesn't seem right, let us know. And, again, we will correct the report and we'll have it for you to discuss again. Thank you. Thank you for your help. Again, it's a really difficult time for us. And we really appreciate any help we can get.
Yep. Thank you very much.
I had one more homework piece that if somebody was listening and went through the tapes, wanted to make sure I followed up on. There was the under construction appendix, and there was the items about water availability for firefighting purposes. Anyways, I looked it up. It corresponds to companion amendments to the IBC and the IFC for buildings under construction, so it's not a big deal. But it looked like a bunch of new stuff, but it's just companion stuff, so we're fine.
Thank you. Anything else before we adjourn? All right, I will see most of you guys on Friday for our hearing. And again, thank you very much.
Andrew, can you stay a couple more minutes? I want to.
Yep, I can.
For the hearing.
Yep. You can give me a call too if you'd rather, or